Senator Gallagher. Senator Rhiannon.
Thank you, Mr President. Tonight I encourage people to eat less meat. I've thought carefully before making this call. I've considered my comments long and hard because one's diet is something that's very personal. I've decided to now add my voice to this call as I believe the combination of the need for climate action, the need to reduce the suffering of animals, the need to end land clearing for grassland that reduces biodiversity, and the need for healthy humans warrants a loud voice for an animal-free diet, or at least a reduced animal diet. The evidence about the impact animal agriculture has on increasing greenhouse gas emissions is very significant. In 2014, the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change released the report Mitigation of Climate Change. The panel said this about animal agriculture in that report. Changes in diet and reductions of losses in the food supply chain have a significant but uncertain potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from food production. The IPC findings came after another study that identified that the importance of reduced meat and dairy consumption for meeting stringent climate change targets. That was published in the April 2014 edition of Climate Change. In 2010, a United Nations report called Priority Products and Materials stated a substantial reduction of impacts would only be possible with a substantial worldwide diet change away from animal products. That report put agriculture's global emissions at 14%. The report stated that animal products, both meat and dairy, in general require more resources and cause higher emissions than plant-based alternatives. Overall, animal agriculture is responsible for about 9% of human-caused carbon dioxide emissions globally. That's from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. The same body has found that the livestock sector is responsible for about 37% of human-caused methane emissions, and about 65% of human nitrous oxide emissions. That's mainly from manure. Now, they're all a very significant contribution to the climate change that we are now urgently dealing with. Adelaide University's Professor of Climate Change, Barry Burke, has estimated that raising animals for human consumption is responsible for half of Australia's short-term global warming gases. It's a very significant study that has been quite groundbreaking. Now, eating vegetables, we know, produces lower greenhouse gas emissions. For example, potatoes, rice, broccoli produce approximately 3 to 5 times lower emissions than an equivalent mass of poultry and pork. Now, I imagine a lot of people here probably would be horrified, and I'm not suggesting that they live on potatoes, rice and broccoli. I'm just making the comparison that these are urgent issues we need to think about. The reason is simple, why there is such a difference, and this is what we do need to get our head around. It's more efficient to grow a crop and eat it than to grow a crop, feed it to an animal as it builds up muscle mass and then eat the animal. To emphasise again, while I'm urging people to have an animal-free diet, there's also the very clear option of reducing one's animal product intake. The evidence detailing the impact of an animal-based diet has been well documented by many credible academics and respected institutions. And that work, and I've just detailed some of it tonight, is having an impact. People are changing their attitudes and changing their diet to eat no or reduced animal products. Animals Australia have done some excellent work in this area, and they have documented some of the changes. There's a very significant group in the United States, Climate Action Group, 1 Million Women is its name. They've taken up this call, as have Oxfam, and Al Gore, who's done such significant work in this area, is now a vegan. Then there's the work of so many schools around the planet. Many of them are adopting meat-free Mondays as a way to teach their students, their staff, about another way of putting their fuel into their tank, and that is with reduced animal products. So there really is some fantastic work, considerable work. It's gaining momentum, it's getting to critical mass. The Stockholm International Water Institute is warning that we must reduce global animal production to just 5% of our calorie intake by 2050 to make sure that we don't run out of fresh water. That's another reason. I forgot to give that reason when I nominated the many aspects and the many advantages of reducing animal products in our diet. This issue of the amount of fresh water that's needed for animal agriculture is huge, and there is the Stockholm International Water Institute making that very clear recommendation. Greenpeace is also encouraging its global followers to get behind World Meat-Free Day. So again, an example of how the momentum is there for this change. Reducing or replacing animal products in our diet also is not hard. There's a great spin-off. You'll be healthier, the cost of your diet will be less, and there's also the excellent spin-off for our society. Our society has an extraordinarily serious problem of increasing obesity, increasing overweight. I'm sure most people here would have read the figures that show this alarming increase. And there's also the spin-off that there will be less suffering among animals. So as I opened up, I said how I thought carefully about this, something I've thought about for a long time, but I've been reluctant to talk about it because I'm very conscious of how personal one's diet is. I'm conscious from my own experience, from my family's experience, just from mixing with people, particularly in social situations. When you meet somebody socially, you so often share food, and therefore talking about the food that they should be sharing and enjoying, I've always been very careful and not voiced an opinion. But I've now changed my attitude on that, and I think that we do need to have this conversation. And also, it's worth considering that we change our attitudes as individuals within a collective society in so many ways. In our own lifetime, we've seen changes in smoking. When I grew up, people would smoke anywhere. Now, there's such restrictions on it. The issue of seatbelts and speeding is given as examples of how we change our behaviour for our own well-being and the well-being of those around us. Then there is restrictions on alcohol, recycling, an area when I was a little girl you just threw all the rubbish in the bin. We didn't think about it. But then we learnt that there was something that we could do in a very responsible, working as individuals in our own home, but has a collective benefit. And I think that all those examples are a reminder that we can change our ways, and surely our diet is something that now warrants our attention, and our attention that will bring benefits to us personally, to our planet, and to all the animals that we inhabit the planet with. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Rhiannon.